There are those that come into this world, find what feels comfortable to them, and live within a set of patterns to keep life easy breezy. I can't judge whether they are living good, great, or exceptional lives. It isn't for me to say. But they carry on like a garden of flowers, blooming and staying pretty for the outside world to see, and then wilting back into the background when their season of life is over. Then there are those that come into this world like a comet blasting the planet and leaving a massive mark. They beat to the rhythm of their own drum, break molds, abandon rules, and make waves at every turn of their lives. That is our dad, Dennis Eugene French, my daddy. Also known as Dear Old Dad since the time we were babes. Befittingly, Dennis the Menace, and now many of you lovingly know him as Pops. A man who embodied rebellion since he was a child, living boldly, pushing the envelope to extreme, and then flat out kicking it right off the edge. My dad was the big fish story. Dad was the guy who built his own race cars and sailed his breaking sailboat to Haiti. He was the guy who taught Jaren and I to fight before we could ever even tie our own shoes. I'd say he did a pretty decent job at that. Well, at least for one of us, but I won't name names. He was the man that left a 4-foot corn snake in a pillowcase in the bathtub for Jenny to discover while showering as a young girl. My dad was a rebel, hunting poisonous snakes to seek revenge on his enemies, placing them in their unlocked cars. He wrestled alligators for 50 cents a picture down in Florida. He flew through the hot, muggy streets of the South on his motorcycle with wild abandon as he ran with some of the dearest friends a man could have, 2 of whom became our family as we grew up, Paul Williams and Bruce Connors. I remember he would tell the story of his motorcycle crash that smashed his hand with such twisted pride while he held up his scars, just one more battle wound to add to the endless collection of his heightened life. My dad was a Marine. As a Marine, my dad became a part of something much bigger than himself, honor. This is a pride he carried with him all his life. He finished the top 3 at Camp Lejeune and was specifically chosen to go to Bethesda Navy Base and assigned to work on the President's and Commandant's planes as a jet mechanic. I think that's pretty badass. He represented the Marine Corps in the rodeo until a bull stepped on his foot and turned his big toe upside down. After surgery, Dad wheeled his wheelchair down to the military library and snuck his way in to peruse around. He found the actual blue book that contained all the top secret classified documents about aliens and UFO sightings. He was caught and kicked out, but that wasn't enough for him. He managed to sneak in one more time to devour the contents in that book, which enabled him to retell with great accuracy the fascinating images of faraway beings our country had in its possession. He always said the movie renditions of aliens were pretty derivatively on point. This was back in 1961, decades before any of this was released to the public. My mom, Deborah French, wanted me to share a story from her days with him. Back in 1976, these 2 lovebirds held no jobs and had no money. They were full-on hippies. Dad had been kicked out of the ironworker apprenticeship because one of their rules was to have short hair, and Dad refused to cut his. Years later, his friend Paul convinced him to go back to ironworking. At this point, he was too old to re-enter the apprenticeship because of age restrictions. There was, however, a workaround, which entailed buying the ironworker book under the table. That would allow him to get hired illegally, and so that's what he set out to do. He found a man in Newfoundland, Canada, selling the book, so Dad showed up at the cabin with a motorcycle from God knows where, and the 2 of them promptly stuffed a huge Duluth pack and set out on what turned out to be a 6-week, 8,000-mile trip of near-death hardship and survival. In Canada, Mom recalled that every billboard was flocked with gruesome moose accidents, totaling dozens of cars and tallying too many mangled deaths. This prompted Dad to stop at a gas station to buy 2 flashlights for Mom to hold in each hand around Dad's body from the back of his bike. It was to help them spot moose as they traveled no less than 90 miles an hour the entire pitch-black highway through the nights. Mom laughed as she recalled this. Traveling that fast, they were both freezing, so they stopped again, stripping their clothes and wrapping themselves in newspapers while the other gas station patrons gawked at them. It worked, though. They slept on dirty, stinky floors of outside gas station bathrooms too close to the stained toilets while semi-truck engines ran all night, keeping them sleepless. It wasn't a well-planned out trip, but Dad really never planned anything. He just flew by the seat of his pants. And so when they finally arrived to their destination after the harsh and dangerous road conditions, no real sleep, going days without food due to lack of funds, and then braving a 12-hour ferry in a storm that nearly capsized them, they found out that the man selling the book was on holiday for 3 weeks. To their luck, Dad knew a couple up that way. Well, he hardly knew them. Still, Mom and Dad crashed at their house, lived off their meals and obligatory hospitality for the entire 3 weeks. Eventually, they got the book and returned on the 12-hour ferry to the mainland, which this time was taken over by henchmen, a motorcycle gang made up of highly dangerous men. They raped and pillaged, ransacked the vehicles on the ferry, and stole what they pleased. Barely escaping these henchmen in yet another torrential storm on the ferry, once back on the road, 8 additional henchmen surrounded Dad's bike with Mom on the back. Dad feared for my mom's safety. After a grueling, tense ride in the middle of these men, he managed to escape, and they stayed hidden away for 2 days to make sure she was safe. Then, in the dark of night, both heard a sharp whistling noise fly by their head. Instantly, Dad deliberately drove off the ditch into a muddy swamp where they didn't move the entire night. He knew it was the sound of a rifle's bullet just barely missing them. The next morning, when they heard cars on the road, they emerged and carried on. The toll plaza confirmed that there was indeed an active assassin out there. Dad's quick reaction had kept them safe, once again. This was a fraction of the craziness that took place, all to try to find work again. The entirety of it all, in all its insane detail and danger and absurdity, is yet another big fish whopper. But Mom attests this one had no exaggeration at all. Dad did become an iron worker for a couple years, a beam walker in fact. He welded steel on the 200-foot high beams over the water while they built bridges over Lake Superior. Of course he did, right? Dad's love for the road is something I have instilled in me too. I believe that is because we were always crammed in the car with him, traveling back and forth to family in Florida. We never stayed in hotels, and the car was so packed full that we had to sit cross-legged on top of stuff. I liked it though. It felt cozy. And I was always in charge of massaging Dad's neck while he drove so he could be more comfortable. I was also in charge of holding this cut-up bottle, this Gatorade bottle, from our tiny sunroof to keep Dad cool while we drove south with no air conditioning. It gave me pride to be his co-captain in these ways, as I always stayed awake with him, unlike the other kids. When Hurricane Andrew hit, we were in a little truck with a covered cab that Jaron and Erica were sleeping in, down in Key West. Dad decided to drive us back up to Central Florida in the middle of the storm. We drove around fallen trees and significant debris, through fiercely angry winds and downpour that prohibited visibility. I stayed up in the passenger seat, unable to sleep like my siblings could, wide-eyed and terrified. But I was also able to be mesmerized because I just knew Dad would get us out safely. When we reached the eye of the storm, Dad and I looked at each other and shared a silent moment together, mesmerized in the eerie calm before we re-entered the fury of one of the largest hurricanes to hit the U.S. As I mentioned the cram-packed cars we traveled in, he was certainly a collector, that guy. Okay, he hoarded, sure, but that just gives us all the stories to laugh about growing up in our sardine-packed houses. The absurdity of keeping butter wrappers to make collages wasn't really the whole picture. It was a glimpse into Dad's intricate mind of fantastical reality. See, he had dreamt of building an entire flea market to sell all of his collectibles. Old cereal boxes in cast iron, milk cartons through time as the marketing changed alongside each era, the dead lizards he had pinned up on our kitchen walls, tools, junk cars, bottles, and multiples of newspapers. You name it, he placed value on it. He walked through life scouring the streets for found art, rusted nuts and bolts and dirty metal findings he was gathering to make a giant welded work of art one day. It was going to be a moose. His mind, like a machine, received input as and torqued it into creativity. Even in his later years, that creativity gently seeped out in his underlying humor and quick-witted retorts. He always spun things in his own way. We used to wood burn and paint plaques together. I still have one of them on my wall, placed deliberately across my bedroom door so I can see it every morning. When we were young, Dad went to college in Duluth to try his hand at jewelry making, another creative commonality we share. It wasn't to pursue a degree, but just to gain some skills and to chase joy. He is also the reason I started drawing in color. He always used to send me boxes full of collected newspaper clippings, brochures with pretty animals on them, walnut seeds that looked like ape faces, little plastic beads or minute figurines, wild rice, sometimes the found art, and sometimes a focal gift. Back in 2004, he sent me 2 boxes of color pastel chalks. I only ever drew in black and white despite loving color. It was just the way my mind translated the images to paper, so I was intimidated by the new medium and set them aside. Then I lost the use of my left hand for months due to the poisonous spider bites, and I was told I'd never draw again. One day, something spoke to me to loosely grip a Q-tip between my thumb and my pointer finger and paint the chalks to transfer color, since I couldn't tightly hold a pencil anymore. I Q-tip painted my first piece of artwork since the spiders destroyed me, and I fell in love with art all over again. Had Dad not sent those, had he not always been thinking of me and putting together boxes, I may never have tried. In all the random collected pieces he had sent, he gifted me the entirety of art again. We whittled so many walking sticks, shaved them down and smoothed them out, and chose boldly colored marbles and agates to place in the natural knots of the wood. I adored this with him. We always ate wild strawberries, raspberries, and blueberries. He showed us the woods, and because of Dad, we were very much a part of them. My dad built an A-frame cabin in the woods, quite a ways off the public road. We had no plumbing, but he had built an outhouse which housed the largest number of spiders you could have ever imagined. Naturally, I took to peeing over a log on the side of the cabin when no one was looking, but I'm sure Dad knew. We also watched that outhouse like a hawk from the tiny window above the only bed we all piled into. When Dad would leave us there, the bears seemed to love to come and scratch at the front door. I remember peeing in many bottles during those days. Speaking of bears, and this one might have been Dad's favorite with me. I know it's one of mine. Dad used to always take us to the dump. It was like our actual family outing. He would drink vodka with his buddy, and us kids would play with all the old spoiled condiments we found, pouring and mixing toxic concoctions we'd actually goat his drunken buddy to eat. Holy shit, that was something. One time when I was young, Dad wasn't paying attention, and little old me found myself caught in between a mother bear and her cub. Dad knew the immediate danger I was in, and though he stayed calm, I could hear it in his voice. He had forgotten his gun. He talked me through staying completely still while facing the mama and looking at him past her giant body. He instructed the others to quietly back up so it was only me and him and the bears. One slow, careful step to the side at a time, my dad directed my tiny exposed body out of the line of danger. He'd picked something up to use as a weapon, I remember, in case he had to charge the bear if she charged me. The tension, even to me as a child, was so palpable. Dad used his voice behind the bear to sound distract her from coming closer to me and eventually talked me far enough away from being mauled to certain death. I just knew he would have thrown himself into the vicious claws and teeth of that mama bear if she'd gotten too close. I knew he would protect me. Hearing Dad retell that story as an adult gave me a different perspective. It was a true gift. He told that story with such glorious pride for how brave I was standing in between a danger we were taught about as early as we walked the woods. He spoke with such delight as he relived me standing courageously still and listening to his every word with precision. I had looked at Dad as the hero in that story as a child, but he retold it as though I was. The pride in him nearly broke me as an adult reliving that moment, and I will always be grateful to have heard his version. This was the man with the most incredible stories. Like I said, the real big fish stories. But this one was ours, and it became my favorite because of how he looked at me when he retold it. I find myself in such a place of raw humility because I am not one to seek validation or affirmation from anyone. But doubt and guilt always creep into the body as one moves their way through the many sticky stages of grief. I know to my core I honored my father with selfless love and compassion, with integrity and honesty. I know that. But knowing that I am the child who lived furthest away and often couldn't visit due to my lessening health, it creeps up on me that maybe Dad doubted I loved him. Not because we didn't communicate, but because I wasn't always in his presence. There have been a handful of you beautiful people who have so graciously shared other stories that house similar perspectives of the one I just retold, Dad's version of the bears. The gift of you sharing with me that Dad did talk about me and was proud of me, it's something I didn't even know I needed until hearing those words. It's a gift I realize I actually desperately needed to remind me that Dad loved me in the same way I loved him. through time and distance, that our souls knew each other very well and were in love the way they were supposed to be, healing, expanding, and memorialized before our final separation. It's amazing what we gather in the aftermath of someone's life. Thinking back on an entire monumentous life lived, such as my dad's, is truly overwhelming. Perspectives shift, details are highlighted, and lessons abound. When I was young, my dad, in all of his stories of grandeur, was my ultimate hero. No one compared to him. Not in real life, not in the movies. He told outlandish but ever so captivating stories of all the lives he saved and those he took. He boasted speed and bravery, car chases and races, police stakeouts, drug runs. He embodied courage and strength. His mind enchanted with ingenuity, creativity, and skills. He delivered such sharp wit and cleverness, all while residing in a fantastical world of that of a dreamer. He always talked about building a sailboat and sailing around the world one day. He wanted to build the underground circular house, something he spoke of in such detail that I had already seen the whole thing come to life in my own mind. He could have done it too. He taught us to fish and hunt and live in the woods for days with minimal supplies. We were given packs with waterproof matches, pocket knives, hooks, string, a pot, bowl, and a wool blanket to survive. And by day 3, if we failed to catch anything, we would get packets of instant oatmeal or mac and cheese. As we got older, as growth sometimes causes, I eventually saw him as the man behind the superhero cape. He, like everyone else, had his demons, and he carried sadness and pain. To live through depression as he did, bravely carrying on and eventually atoning for some of his past transgressions, I stand deeply proud of his strength, his resiliency, and his grit. He kept going. He never lost his fight, and he turned himself around, propelled by love and purpose for his family, for his kids and his grandbabies. He became a better man. No one in this life is perfect, not even those pretty, consistent flowers living a simple life until their season is over that I mentioned in the beginning. But in the end, everything about my dad has made sense. Through our undeniable love for one another and the similarities we shared, my dad gifted me with the largest lessons I have ever gained. I found genuine and utter forgiveness for the things I couldn't understand when I was young. I experienced only pure, unconditional, unwavering love for this complex man that made me feel a gamut of emotions, all leading to the admiration, gratitude, impressiveness, and above all, the deepest and most profound love and sense of protection I've known. I am so humbled by everything he has given me. I am so deeply proud to be his daughter, carrying on many of his special traits and strengths. I'm grateful, so grateful to witness the overpowering nature of his entire elaborate life with every valley and every peak and every detailed, amazing story in between from the perspective I have now. I want nothing more than to honor my father by walking my truth against the grain when necessary, just like he did. I want to honor him by always leading with integrity, being bold and brave and facing my fears, just like he did. I want to continue creating and residing in the world of fantasy, just like he did. I want to make him proud of me every day, just like he made me. I want to share and retell his stories, just like he did. My dad, yeah, he really was the greatest storyteller and filled all of our lives with colorful imagination and bewilderment. He took us on endless wild journeys as he relived his glory days and shined brighter than anyone ever could while he narrated his tales. As I've sat to write this tribute for weeks, it's so difficult to narrow the flood of thoughts and images that have bombarded me since his passing. I want to tell the world absolutely everything about him, but I know his story will carry on. I know his stories will be retold. Dad gifted us with the most colossal life a man could live, built on one story after another, and it is here where his life will carry on. To my dear old dad, the ultimate big fish story. I love you with a broken, bleeding heart now and forever.
I will continue to talk to you and pray to you as my angel every day until we meet again. I miss you painfully with a pit in my stomach, even though I know you are all around me and continue to shower me with signs from beyond. I am so proud to be yours. I am so grateful to hurt this badly in your loss, because it shows how truly, irreversibly I love you through and through. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything you taught us and all the gifts that continue to show themselves today. I love you. You will never be forgotten. You truly broke the mold.